All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another live stream. Excited to go through some more responses tonight and also to answer some of your questions. A lot of questions last week. It was very kind of popular, I suppose, last week's live stream. A lot of people ended up watching it. I think people liked engaging with a lot of the questions that were being asked. There were some really good questions. A lot of you had assessment-related questions. You had things you wanted feedback on in terms of how to approach different, essay questions or craft of writing tasks. So happy to answer all of your questions again this evening. And I also have a very thorough deconstruction of someone's body paragraph that I want to go through with you all, because I think that's going to be something you can directly apply to your own work, especially when you are looking to refine and fine-tune your own essays. So I've got some samples lined up, but first of all, like last time, I want to open the floor up to you. If you have any pressing questions, any assessment task notifications that you want some advice on, now is the time to ask those questions. Make sure you give me all of the context. If you've got an assessment notification that you want advice on, then please put it in the chat. Say hello as well. Always good to see some names up on the screen as well. Definitely enjoy doing these, especially when you guys are engaging and asking good questions. Definitely helps me. So feel free to ask some questions. If you're here early, I can see a couple of you are already on. So go ahead. Nala, great to see you again. Love the loyalty to the live streams. I've seen you in quite a few, maybe all of them. I don't know, but you've been in several, which I really appreciate. So great to see you again. Let me know if you have any questions that you want answered up front. And anyone else who has any questions, assessment notifications, make sure you ask about them now. And as always, if you need any additional help with resourcing, if you need to look at essay examples or analysis to help you build your responses, then make sure you go to Jeddle.com. You'll also find JeddAI access there, where you can submit responses for immediate feedback, as well as real life expert feedback from our team. So that's available to you at Jeddle.com, resources and marking. But in terms of the live stream here, I want to be giving you as much value as possible while we're all here together. And I'm also going to go through that response. So if there are no initial questions, I'll get into it. I'll come back, put your questions in the chat, and I will try and get to them all by the end of this live stream. So here we go. Let me see if we can get this happening. Maybe, maybe not. Here we go. Looks like it's working. Okay, cool. So hopefully that's coming through for you. I definitely enjoy going through the responses that you guys are submitting. If you still want to get your work marked, make sure you use the link below in the description for these live stream videos. There should always be a link in there. If you put the response through and you follow the prompts, then I will get to them as soon as I can. I try to get through as many as I can. I go through them in order, so make sure you don't wait too long. But apologies in advance if I don't get to yours in a timely fashion, because there just are so many, and I try to go through the ones that I do look at quite thoroughly. So remember, you've got JeddAI if you want that instant feedback and you want to ask myself or a team of experts. You go through the JeddAI platform via Jeddle.com. Otherwise, hope you enjoy the live feedback here. So this was a response, a body paragraph response for Module A, Textual Conversations, which is English Advanced for the HSC. But again, if you're not studying this particular text or doing this module, still stay tuned, because all of the advice here is going to be relevant for your essays, no matter what essay you're doing. Some of the things I mentioned might be specific to the module, but the general advice as to how to improve the quality of your response, in this case, the body paragraph, is going to be broadly applicable to all texts and modules, any essay, effectively. Okay, so I'm trying to remember who submitted this one. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I hope you can recognize your own work if you're looking at this review. Thanks for submitting it. We've got a body paragraph on Keats and Bright Star. I should fix that up there. Brightstar for module A, textual conversations. So let's go through it and go through some of the feedback, things that I picked up on. I'm just going to put it in a different mode here. Okay, the textual conversation between Keats's La Belle Dame Sans Merci and Campion's Brightstar shifts responders' insights into female agency by subverting traditional gender representations, reshaping their compositions. Okay, so let's break down that topic sentence. So here we have the topic sentence. Now, the first thing I noticed is that this student has actually put the full text name and, well, almost the full text name, Keats's La Belle Dame Sans Merci and Campion's Brightstar in the topic sentence. Now, presumably you would have already done that in your introduction. So you don't want to have to keep writing the full thing out. So I would try to say the textual conversation between Keats and Campion, because we know what you're talking about. You've already introduced their text in your intro. This is all just a waste of words and a waste of critical time, especially for Mod A where there's so much to cover. You're covering 2 texts, critical time in the exam. So try not to repeat long titles and things like that. That's just a basic thing, but all of the best students know this. They will be very efficient with their time and their word selection. So just do the composer's name, do shortcuts where you can, as long as it still makes sense and it's still relatively formal. That's always the preferred option. So the textual conversation between Keats and Campion shifts. You could even just say Keats and Campion shift responders' insights. Like, let's try that. Let's see how concise we can make this, because these other bits aren't really adding much value at all. Yes, textual conversation is related to the module, so at least the marker knows you are engaging with the module, but it should be obvious anyway from your topic sentence that this is engaging with the module without having to actually say the title. So Keats and Campion shift responders' insights into female agency by subverting traditional gender representations. Now, Keats and Campion shift responders' insights. The issue with that, as I put here in the comment, this is quite vague, okay? Because you haven't actually said what the insights have shifted from or what the insights are. You say it shifts our insights. So we had certain insights when we looked at Keats's poetry, and then you're saying that shifted. We had a new insight when we looked at Campion. Now, you don't actually say what that shift is, what the shifting insights are. You just say what it's about. You say we have shifting insights into female agency. Okay, so I'm going to think differently about female agency. And then you say how that is going to take place. The traditional gender representations are going to be subverted. Okay, that's good. I like the word subvert. Subvert means undermined, challenged, kind of flipped. So if females were represented as not having much power or as being these kind of destructive or threatening figures to men, well, in Brightstar, Campion's actually going to subvert that and going to suggest that females are not like that and that they're not to be feared or threatened, but that they should have their own autonomy, because it's coming from a place of abundance in terms of that, the feminine energy, whereas there's a state of scarcity. There's an energy of scarcity around Keats's poem, where if females were given too much autonomy, men were defenseless and men were powerless. So that was a big threat and that was unacceptable. So I think that's what this student is tapping into in terms of the concept. But the problem is you haven't quite been specific enough about what those insights are. You've just said how that shift has taken place. You've then elaborated here with this dash and said reshaping their compositions. Feels like a bit of a throwaway line, doesn't it? Because it's so vague, reshaping their compositions. Try not to just throw those in as extras unless there's something quite specific. So you're not offering a specific insight there. You're saying reshaping. You already said shifts. So because it's not adding much, I would just get rid of it. If you want to make it something more specific, something that actually unpacks one of those rubric terms, then go for it. But at the moment, it's not happening. So it's not adding value. It's actually taking away. It's diluting the quality of the response because it is detracting from the good parts of this. The good parts are mainly this. The good part is mainly this, because you actually say a specific how in terms of the shift in the insights, okay? Where you're a little bit vague again is what you're actually saying about female agency. So a little bit more detail there. You might have felt like you didn't have time or room to do it because you had all of these extra words in there. But look, none of those extra words were adding anything. They were just textual conversation, the text names. They're not getting you any points. All they're doing is taking up valuable space for you to actually elaborate on things like this. So important rule for all of you in your topic sentences, don't waste time on the things that don't matter. Get straight to the point and elaborate on the point. All the marks are going to be coming from how in-depth, how sophisticated, how specific you are with these specific points here, these ideas, these concepts. Don't just tell me there are new insights. Tell me what those insights are. Yes, you can tell me what they are at a very broad level because it's a topic sentence. You don't need to go into too much detail, but you need to give me that general shift conceptually. Okay, so it's kind of like specific but general. If you can get that balance right, then you're off to a good start. And then you can get way more specific in your actual analysis within the body paragraph. So you need to tell us the type of shift, what those insights are, and you also could have mentioned why they are offered. You say that there's a shift, but you haven't attributed it to the contextual shift. Okay, you do it a little bit later, but it's something worth addressing in the topic sentence in this case, especially because you don't have that much more material here. So it would be good of you to actually talk about the key contextual paradigms that have shifted and how that has resulted in those different insights that move away from a fear of female agency. This is really the insight, right? It was a fear of female agency into a kind of encouraged state of female empowerment. So fear of female agency to a celebration of female empowerment. That's a nice way of putting it. Let me put that in there for you. A fear of female agency, because this is the shift itself. This is what you didn't actually specify. You just told me that there was one. Now, the celebration bit might not be the exact term that's appropriate for you, but just giving you an example, that would actually be saying the shift itself. You don't have to tell me there's a shift. You don't have to tell me that there are insights. Just say it shifts responders' understanding, or it shifts perspectives on female agency by moving away. We move away from a fear of female agency or autonomy. You might want to change that word if you already said it before. And then into is the key word. That's the shift, right? Away from. These words imply the shift, and then these spots here are where you're actually getting the marks. That's what you were missing. You're missing these specific parts that identify the shift. Okay, I hope that makes sense. You can also add in some context as well, some of those general contextual paradigms that have shifted to cause that shift in representation. Okay, hope that's all making sense for everyone so far. Let me zoom in a little bit more just so it's super clear. Okay, great. So next sentence, Keats's poem, again, look, this student had the title there and then the title again, right? Now, you can have the title, oh no, you have the title almost 3 times. Okay, so you can have the title once because you do need to specify the specific poem, but often you can even get away with just a shortened version of the title. So be strategic there, consult your teacher, see what their preferences are, just so you're not doing something that puts them off. But generally speaking, I would mention it once, but in a shortened version if you can. If it's the very first time mentioning the poem's title, I would keep it in full, but just be careful repeating things too much, okay? But I make a point of that because you already set it up here. But now that we haven't set it up there, we probably will use it here. Keats's poem La Belle Dame sans Merci presents La Belle Dame as an enchanting yet dangerous seductress who lures the knight into ruin. Okay, who lures a knight? Have we? Because the knight doesn't make any sense. You haven't said anything about a knight, so why is it the a knight into ruin? Okay. The problem with that is you kind of leave me there, and then I'm like, so what? Okay, Keats's poem presents that. All right, feels like you just were storytelling, very descriptive. That's what happens. Okay, that's what happens, but why is it important? Add some context there. Add some form. Tell me why that is significant to the meaning of the text. How does that relate to female agency? Now, sure, you might be saying, well, I'm going to get into that, but you've effectively chosen to have this elaboration or second topic sentence, an extended topic sentence here, but you haven't used it in the right way. Because if you're going to elaborate on the initial topic sentence and go into the specific poem, you need to bring in context, form, or a specific effect or impact that the representation would have on the responder. So you haven't done any of those three things. You need to do at least one of those. All you've done is just told me what happens. If you're going to tell me what happens, that's great. You need to accompany that with why that happens. Why is that represented? Context. How it's represented from a form perspective. So like what type of poem is it and why is that important? Be specific about that. And also what's the specific meaning behind it? The so what? What's the impact on the responder? So one or two out of those three elements in conjunction with the what happens in the poem is necessary for a second topic sentence or elaboration sentence here. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, going into your actual analysis. The fairy illustrated through supernatural imagery, comma, full, beautiful, a fairy's child, her hair was long, her foot was light. The issue there is you've got commas all over the place, and I'm having to stop and start to actually get into the quote. What we really want with the quote is for it to flow naturally into the sentence, so that if I was to remove the quotation marks, it would sound like a normal sentence. In other words, I have to embed that quote naturally, so it feels like a normal sentence. Now, how do you do that? You have to be creative in terms of how you start the quote, how you end it, when you choose to put it in. What are the words just before the quote? But we need to do some work there to make sure it's flowing so that I don't have to start and stop every time I read the quotes. Okay, that just feels a little bit basic. We can elevate the sophistication by creating more seamless quotations. Okay, so the fairy, this start is pretty basic as well. The fairy illustrated through supernatural imagery. Let's see. So supernatural imagery. The supernatural image. Keats's use of supernatural imagery to depict the fairy as full, beautiful. See how I'm kind of reframing that? Keats's use of supernatural imagery to depict the fairy as full, beautiful. See, I didn't have to pause there between the as full, beautiful. I don't have to put a comma in there. So you have to just play around with the sentence, start like that, weave it in, and let's make sure the rest of it makes sense. To depict the fairy as full, beautiful, a fairy's child, her hair was long, her foot was light. Now the question is, do we need all of this? And which parts don't we need? Because we always want to make the quotes as short as possible, the ASAP rule, right? It's like as soon as possible. It's as short as possible for quotes. How can I make this as short as possible while preserving everything that's necessary to prove the technique and to show enough meaning in relation to what you're going to say after? So, depict the fairy as full, beautiful. Do we even need a fairy's child? Maybe, but it depends. Maybe we could say Keats's use of supernatural imagery to depict the fairy as full, beautiful with, let's see, to depict the fairy as a fairy's child. Maybe you don't even need full, beautiful. As a fairy's child, to depict a fairy's child. What about this? See, I'm just playing around with the quote, where to start it. I'm just going to get rid of that first bit. To depict the fairy as a fairy's child. To depict a fairy's child with, now notice what I'm doing here. I'm going to break up the quote into two parts. Markers really like this. This is a pro tip. For all of you listening right now, this is a pro tip for how to work with quotes. If you can break up quotes into smaller parts and let it flow into the sentence, you are in that top 5 to 10% of students. Keats's use of supernatural imagery to depict the fairy as a fairy's child. We don't need to say that, so we get rid of that. To depict a fairy's child, and then I'm going to stop the first part of the quote there. I'm going to add the word with hair. Her hair was light. Whose hair? Whose? There we go. That works. See how that flows in? You're just going to play around a little bit with these, and you can often get to a spot where it all flows. Keats's use of supernatural imagery to depict a fairy's child whose hair was long, her foot was light, that's fine. It doesn't technically make sense there. It flows in nicely there. Get rid of that comma. Emphasizes. See, now there's no pauses to get these quotes in. Have a look at these quotes, and I've just broken it up with the who's. It's just a more sophisticated handling of quotations. Okay, hopefully that is making sense to you. It emphasizes her seductive beauty. The problem, what's the problem with this effect? You're not saying enough. There's no depth to your analysis here. Emphasizes her seductive beauty. Okay, that's the direct, obvious, superficial meaning. And I'm just being blunt about this because I really want to help you make this extra change to improve. You need to actually add another layer of depth to the analysis, because the bit in blue is really where you get the marks, okay? How you integrate quotes, mentioning a technique like supernatural imagery, that's all important, but where you really get the top marks comes from the part in blue. It comes from what you say about that evidence. And here, because you've only really said it emphasizes her seductive beauty, that doesn't really connect to the overall point. I mean, the seductive beauty clearly will link to something about how the men might fear that, how they feel threatened by that, but you haven't made that extra connection. So you need to go one step further with your analysis. You guys need to think about your analysis as being in two parts. It's twofold. There's the immediate direct meaning that's obvious, emphasizes her seductive beauty, okay. And then there's the second layer of analysis, right? You need to go to that second layer. What is the consequence of that? How does that relate to the overall point you're trying to make? Okay, so there's the direct obvious meaning, then there's the link to the broader point you're trying to prove, and or the question as well, the link to the question. That all comes in the second part of the analysis. So often it's good to have a comma after that first part and extend it, or you can kind of do it all in one go. But let's have a look at an example here. So because you've lacked depth here, what you could have said was emphasizes her seductive beauty, emphasizes, instead of just saying emphasizes her seductive beauty, I've rewritten something here. Let me just pop it in here. There we go. Have a look at this. So I'm saying instead of that, emphasizes the seductive beauty that will ultimately ensnare and discard the knight. Now we're getting to why it's important in relation to the knight, the male, right? Because you set up here, it's about a knight going into ruin, but you hadn't elaborated on this analysis in light of that previous point you were making. Then there's a comma, right? So we've done the first part, okay, the seductive beauty, and it's going to ensnare the knight. All right, that's significant. Why? Comma, illustrating the demise of a traditionally masculine archetype. Okay, this is sounding sophisticated. Not to toot my own horn, I've just quickly put that in just before we started, but I'm just showing you a way that you can go to that next level with the analysis. And I'm just working off what you've got here, by the way. I'm not saying this is my read of the poem or anything like that. I'm just literally working off what you had and thinking what could work for you. Illustrating the demise of a traditionally masculine archetype. Now I'm going to that next level of depth and detail with my analysis. And I'm thinking beyond just the quote. I've done my specific analysis on the quote because it says it's a fairy's child, the hair was long, the foot was light. Okay, that's the seductive beauty. But what's the broader point? What's the deeper meaning behind that? Well, it's showing that is going to be the demise, the downfall of the knight, who's a traditionally masculine archetype, right? The knight is that medieval masculine figure who's courageous, who could never be brought down. And yet this seductress, this female character, is actually going to bring down the knight, right? The knight's going to be abandoned by her, and he's going to be emotionally hurt, and he's going to be hurt in that way, which is still a threat to the masculine. So we put here at the hands of a manipulative femme fatale figure. Femme fatale, one of these destructive female forces. That's just one of those contextual terms that's good to know. I've added that in there. And you can see the difference between emphasizes her seductive beauty and emphasizes the seductive beauty that will ultimately ensnare and discard the knight, illustrating the demise of a traditionally masculine archetype at the hands of a manipulative femme fatale figure. There's just so much more depth to the second one One, because I'm saying more about it, and two, I'm choosing to actually analyze things, not just in terms of the direct quote, but the broader implications for the context and the point about men feeling insecure about female power. I'm connecting everything back. Okay, just pausing here to see a question. There's a question here. I'm going to come back in a second. Why should we not use the full quote? Perhaps there's a metaphor in the quote, only unusable if it's all. Yeah, so you need to use as much of the quote as you need, or I should say as few words as you need to prove the technique. So if you do need to use a full line because that whole line has the whole metaphor that's important for your analysis, then you need to keep it. The point is that most students will use too much of a quote and they're trying to show a metaphor or simile, but they didn't need all of the words from the whole 2 lines to prove that. So as long as you've got enough in there to show the metaphor or the technique that you're trying to prove and analyze, then that's all you need. That's the point about not having quotes that are too long, making quotes ASAP, as short as possible. Breaking up quotes is also more sophisticated. It's easier to embed shorter quotes into your sentence. That's why it's an advantage. And also the reason to shorten your quotes is so that you focus your attention and time on analysis, not on evidence. Analysis is more important than evidence. Remember that. Analysis, the part in blue, here, the part in blue that I've added in here, this is the analysis. Look how important it is in terms of how much attention I gave it versus the orange parts. The person who can get very short, concise quotes in and then have very detailed analysis is the person who gets the best marks. So if you all remember one thing from the live stream, and great to see so many of you tuning in right now. If you all remember one thing from this live stream, it's to shorten the quotes as much as possible, but still have enough to prove the technique that you have. Sometimes that means you'll have to have a bit more. It can't be too short. It needs to make sense. But if you can make those as concise as possible, embed them in your sentences so that they flow and you don't have to pause to say them, they flow like a normal sentence. And then you can have a detailed, double-layered analysis, then that's how you can get really good marks, okay? A double-layered analysis. There's 2 layers. There's the immediate meaning. Okay, there's a seductive beauty in this quote. Okay, so what? Ask yourself so what each time and see if you can go that layer deeper. Okay, next sentence. Moreover, evocative visual imagery conveys the fairy as otherworldly. Okay, so you're kind of telling me the immediate, this is the direct effect. I'm actually going to split these up here. This is the direct effect, and then there's the deeper effect here, okay? So the pink is the direct effect, the blue is the extra layer of analysis. Now here you've structured it, in a perfectly fine way by saying the technique and then the effect followed by the quote. You can definitely do that, but all you've said is conveys the fairies otherworldly. You're kind of only giving me basic adjectives for the fairy. Like, it's not that deep. That's the issue with this. But you do actually go on to have a second layer here. So let's go through this sentence. Moreover, evocative visual imagery conveys the fairies otherworldly. First one, you told me she had a seductive beauty. Now she's otherworldly. Giving me those 2 traits is not going to give you a band 6 analysis. That's not going to give you top marks. But if you go further with it, possibly. Issue here again is that we have to stop and start this quote. Moreover, evocative visual imagery conveys the fairies otherworldly, comma, and her eyes were wild, comma, with the symbolism of wild. Okay, now you're actually breaking it down a bit more, depicting a duality of her character, both enhancing and destructive, reflecting romantic anxieties, desire leading to devastation. You wouldn't actually keep that in quotes, in brackets, surrounding female sexuality by foreshadowing the night's eventual suffering. All right, that's much better. Does everyone see how the analysis here, the with, it really goes into detail now. That analysis there is your second layer. You even almost got a third layer there because you link context. You bring context into the game, which is fantastic. So, it's not all kind of in need of improvement. I think you've done a really good job with this one, but you could see the difference between this piece of analysis and your first one where you originally ended the sentence there. That was your original sentence. So you've got to have consistency with the depth of analysis. Now, to address the point about the quote not flowing, let's see. Moreover, evocative visual imagery is used to convey the fairies. Oh no, okay, let's see. The evocative visual imagery of her eyes were wild. Just thinking of different ways we can work this in. See if you guys can figure it out. We're trying to weave in this quote into this sentence so that it flows normally. Conveys the fairy, to attribute, to ascribe the fairy, to characterize. I'm trying to make it flow with the word in here, but it can be tricky. I definitely don't think end is going to be relevant, so we can basically cut that out. So whoever was asking before about, shortening quotes, we don't need end at the start. The evocative visual imagery. To characterize, her eyes were wild. What we can do here now, because I'm kind of thinking there's no obvious way of doing it, but you can manipulate the quote itself. So if everyone wants an extra tip here on how you can make quotes weave in when you feel like they can't, how do you want the quote to sound to get it into the sentence, right? And we want to minimize the amount of changes we make to the original quote, but we can manipulate this quote. So evocative visual imagery, maybe we'll do the evocative visual imagery. No. Evocative visual imagery conveys the fairy as otherworldly, not least due to her wild eyes, or her eyes as wild. Depicts, that portrays the fairy's eyes. Okay, instead of saying were wild, I want to say as wild. Okay, this is a more advanced thing, but have a look at this versus the original. I've changed the word were to as, and because I did it, I've added square brackets to signal that I've made a replacement. I've made an adjustment on the original quote. Always ideal to be able to incorporate the exact words, and short quotes will help you do that. But in this case, the evocative visual imagery that portrays the fairy's eyes as wild, right? So see how that works there? Conveys her otherworldly nature, if I was going to go with that. And then we can get rid of that with the symbolism of wild depicting da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so hopefully that shows you another little trick for using quotes. You can manipulate quotes, minimize the amount of changes you do, and do a square bracket if you're going to change a quote from the original. Okay, so I'm just finding a color to put that in. There we go. All right, just going to look at some comments now. Can you please post some Artists of the Floating World example essays? Can I post them? Where do you want me to post them, Sophie? We've got some on Jeddle.com. If you're already on Jeddle as a subscriber, let me know if you need another one there for reference, and I will put one there. But Jeddle.com, the subscription with Artists of the Floating World should give you some good exemplar materials to look at. But let me know if you're already on there, and if you want to see another one, we can put that on the priority list. Okay. My teacher's advice is being specific with quotes and examples, yet I provide exact references to the context therein and the full quote. I'm loving this, this capitalized, these capitalized words here. Not sure why every word is starting with a capital. And the full quote followed by the literacy technique. What does this advice mean? Be specific with quotes and examples. I provide exact references to the context therein and the full quote. It's not always about full quote, right? It's about specific quotes. Specific doesn't mean full. You should be using the most relevant parts of quotes and then providing very direct analysis that relates to that quote. That's what should be happening there. Sophie, I didn't catch what you said. I was distracted by my study. That reminds me a bit of the whole dog ate my homework excuse. No excuses. Got to tune into these live streams, or you miss the value. Now, obviously, kidding. Where you should look, for example, as I was saying, if you're already on Jeddle.com as a subscriber to Artists of the Floating World, let me know, because if you need more exemplars, then we can obviously prioritize that. But there's some really good exemplar material. Otherwise, I was asking, where did you want those posted? Because typically we do it through the Jeddle platform. So hope that helps. But glad to know, some of you have got the live stream going on in the background, hopefully helping you study, immediately applying what you're listening to. So that's always good. So appreciate that, Sophie. All right, next sentence here. However, now we go into the other text. So remember, this student has started off with some analysis of a Keats poem, and they're doing a comparison within this paragraph. So now they're going to analyze the film that's being compared. However, Campion's film reframes the fairy temptress through the dissonant characterization. Oh, I've already made some adjustment here. So the original was, however, Campion's film emphasizes a dissonance between the texts through reframing the fairy temptress figure through illustrating Brawn as da-da-da-da-da. It was a bit clunky, so you can see the bit I've crossed out. Let's just go straight into the adjustment here. Campion's film reframes the fairy temptress through the dissonant characterization of Brawn as Keats's intellectual and emotional equal, challenging traditional romantic notions of women portrayed as destructive influences. Okay, that sounds like a topic sentence, not a mid-body paragraph sentence. So if you're going to put this in the middle of the body paragraph, it's great if it kind of sounds like a topic sentence because you're showing that shift, but it's actually more suited as a separate topic sentence to another body paragraph versus being wedged in the middle here. I would also have some evidence, specific evidence, quotes. In this case, you might have film techniques to immediately engage in the textual analysis. Otherwise, you're wasting a valuable opportunity to do so. I don't think you should have these topic sentence-like sentences, right? It's like a topic sentence. This really sounds like a topic sentence, to be honest. Feels like a topic sentence. I don't think you should have these wedged in the middle. If you're going to do that, why not just split it and have this as body 2, if that's how you were going to do it. But if you do want it to be within the same paragraph, then I feel like you should go straight into your analysis, because you already had a topic sentence at the top that talked about both texts and the shift. And then you came into Keats. Now I think you should come into Campion a bit more directly. So that's my advice there. But what you're actually saying there is good. I like the Keats's intellectual and emotional equal, really like that. So definitely thumbs up for the sophistication and the conceptual element there. But I think be careful using all of that time in the middle of a body paragraph without getting into the analysis. But if you find that you're able to do that within the allocated time and you still get 2 good pieces of analysis after, then that might work. Reinforced through Braun's shared recital, reshaping La Belle Dame by emphasizing the intense intimacy between the pair, illustrated through sensuous diegetic sounds of birds and soft readings of the stanzas. That is basically like an unfinished sentence that you need to recheck the syntax here. The syntax doesn't feel right. Okay, the syntax does not feel right. It doesn't flow. It is a bit clunky even when you talk about the recital, reshaping La Belle Dame. It's a bit unclear. So I think you want to make that sentence a lot clearer in terms of the example you're looking at there. And yeah, you need to tell us the deeper meaning. Like what is the deeper meaning? You've told us that it's reinforced. What's reinforced? You say there's shared intimacy. You say that there's bird sounds. What's the point here? Again, the point might be what you just said in the previous sentence, in which case, see if you can link those 2 things. You're missing that extra layer of analysis again there, okay? Thus, Campion positions audiences to reconsider the relationship. It sounds like you're done with your analysis now. After that one sentence that didn't really make sense, you now go on to do some kind of summary sentences. And in fact, you have 2 of them. You have 2 link sentences. You had an extra topic sentence in the middle that you didn't need. And you only provided 1 sentence of actual analysis and it didn't flow. So you're in big trouble with this part of the body paragraph, in my opinion. My advice would be to have at least 2 in-depth pieces of analysis that connect back to this idea and show the shift, and then have 1 sentence summing everything up. Because if you read this, You say, thus, campaign positions audiences to reconsider the relationship. You talk about intertextuality. Then at the end, you say, again, thus, both texts parallel each other. It's like you had two different options and you've decided to go with both. Are they two alternative link sentences? Because you definitely don't need two link sentences. Have one, add another sentence of analysis in, and consider merging one of these sentences with this middle topic sentence. That's as good a structural advice as I can give you on that. So I hope that really helps. All right, so that is the feedback there. Any questions? I'm going to go back in here. Yes, Sophie, I know you were studying, just joking, of course. Oh, okay, here we go. This is my paragraph. I really appreciate the feedback. Didn't really look over the paragraph. Kind of rushed it to submit it by tonight. Again, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of excuses from you guys. No, it was a pretty good effort. So hopefully that all made sense to you. Now, it's great that I've got you on here. Remind me of your name as well if you're happy to share it. I know it was on the document, but we didn't have it in there on the doc. But thank you for submitting that. I hope that benefited everyone. I mean, that was a pretty detailed breakdown of some of the key things that people struggle with their body paragraphs, stopping at that superficial analysis where you basically say the immediate obvious thing that a quote might mean, but you don't say the deeper meaning. And just to go back to that for a second, so everyone should be looking at this. I really want to emphasize where this student did a great job and then where they fell a little bit short. So yes, it's Sebastian. Thank you, Sebastian. You'll have to rewind the live to view it all because it's pretty in depth. I think you'll like it. Let's all go back over here. So here's a good sentence of analysis by Sebastian, and I've done some tweaks to it. Actually, not many tweaks to this one. This was Sebastian's best sentence of analysis. Let's go through why. Moreover, the evocative visual imagery that portrays the fairy's eyes as wild. Notice I did not have to pause to say the quote because I adjusted the quote. I manipulated it even, changed the original word from were to as, and therefore put square brackets to make that flow in the sentence. Okay, and I reworded things accordingly. Then went to conveys her otherworldly nature with the symbolism. Okay, so the otherworldly nature really just tells us the basic thing. It tells us a basic fact, an observational characteristic. You're not going to get many marks, if any, for that. But then there's the extension, the blue part. Focus on the blue part of your analysis, the next layer, with the symbolism of wild depicting a duality of her character, both enchanting and destructive, reflecting romantic anxieties, contextual link, surrounding female sexuality by foreshadowing the knight's eventual suffering. Fantastic. You brought context into it, which is absolutely essential, multiple times per paragraph for a Mod A essay. At least two references to specific contextual influences per paragraph. Okay, that's really key. But you've got this much more detailed and in-depth analysis there. And we looked at this first sentence, which was the weakest one, because it ended here. You just said there's supernatural imagery. The quote didn't originally flow, but we made it flow by breaking it up into two parts. That's a good tip for everyone. And then in addition to saying it emphasizes the obvious seductive beauty that's in that quote, we drew a link to the deeper meaning that's going to prove our broader point about the context, which was about how the masculine archetype is going to be threatened by this femme fatale figure, femme fatale being a nice contextual term. That's what's going to get you the top marks. All right. Appreciate you, Sebastian. Appreciate everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. If anyone has any quick questions, happy to stick around for a few minutes. I think I said this last week, ended up going for an extra hour. But hey, happy to help. So send through anything you want answered right now. If you want your work checked over, reviewed to that extent, like with Sebastian's, then make sure you use the link below these live stream videos and I'll go through it. If you haven't checked out last week's episode, last week's live stream, I think a lot of people found that super helpful. 2 hours of Q&A, just common student questions. So I'm sure there's lots of value in there for you guys to check out. Obviously, Jeddle.com has the resources that we produce based on all of your specific texts and modules to give you all the good analysis, the juicy stuff that you want to be using in your essays, the kind of stuff that you see me add into these responses. So Jeddle.com will have all of that analysis and those exemplars there. And JeddAI, which is the marking tool, will help you go on, submit work, and you can get someone from our team to review your essays your assessment drafts, and you can also use the AI tool as well to get rubric-specific breakdowns. Now, a question to finish on. How would you adapt an essay to a multimodal task? Well, it would depend a little bit on the precise nature of the multimodal task, but generally speaking, for a multimodal where you have to do an audio recording and you have some kind of PowerPoint slides going, you're doing something on Canva, something of that nature, we generally call it a spoken essay, but there are some modifications. So I would start to do it with doing a multimodal by writing an essay that you intend to basically say out loud and record. The difference is when you look at the assessment notification, you need to have a good understanding of who the intended audience is. Sometimes in the instruction, it says, you are going to be presenting a TEDx seminar to other Year 12 students. Well, you need to factor that in and actually address your audience in that spoken essay. So you start to make a tweak there. Okay, so that's the first thing. Make sure you look at the audience that is given to you in the assessment information. The second point is that you also need to show some kind of rhetorical device knowledge. So you need to show how to use whether it's persuasive or discursive will depend on the precise instructions. But generally speaking, you're trying to present an argument like a spoken essay, and you're going to have to use some more of those obvious rhetorical devices like rhetorical questions. How do you feel about this and actually engaging with the audience? Okay, so rhetorical devices like rhetorical questions are good. Repetition occasionally, kind of repeating a really powerful or pertinent point, but don't overuse any of these things. I think some of these things are good at the start to kind of hook the audience. Good to have a little hook at the start, relate to your audience, but also a really powerful technique for turning an essay into a multimodal kind of essay is to engage directly with the audience by using the word you and we, collective pronouns, right? Collective or first person plural. So we, us, our, and then also having direct second person appeal through the word you or your. In your experience, has this happened? So you and your, we, us, our, and then engaging with that context using some rhetorical devices like rhetorical questions, bit of repetition. You might have to establish your credibility. So looking at the rhetorical triangle of ethos, logos, pathos, right? So ethos, making sure you have credibility. So you just subtly or briefly, I should say, not even subtly, briefly refer to yourself as someone who has authority. So you might say, in my 10 years as a writer, if you kind of make something up depending on the nature of the task, and that gives you a bit of authority. In over after 2 decades of writing, maybe it says you're an author and you need to pitch something to other readers or Year 12 students. So you can have a bit of ethos to basically demonstrate or prove to the audience that you are someone worth listening to. And then logos means you're going to have some concrete examples in there. You would have examples anyway in an essay. And then pathos means you're appealing to the emotions of the reader. So that's where you really want to have those rhetorical devices at play, as well as the direct second person. So saying you're tapping into how they might feel about a situation. Have you ever been in this situation? So tapping into the emotions of the reader is important as well. Those are all kind of small things and small tweaks that should be made to what is otherwise a very normal essay that you would take into an exam. Okay, so you're kind of going with an essay as the first draft and then making all of those tweaks to make it more multimodal-like. Rohan says you're going to burn my paragraph when you read mine. Well, that's harsh and visceral. I hope I don't burn it, but I'm sure it's okay. Just have you put it through? Make sure you submit it on using the link. And anyone else who wants their work reviewed as well, make sure you submit it. It's only a paragraph, so you don't have to share your whole essay or anything like that, but it is worth taking this opportunity to get this live feedback. I'm going to look at one last question here. Rohan says, what do examiners think about breaking up the quote and analyzing them? E.g., Agawas symbolically manifest that men who start by burning books end by burning each other. Yeah, you can break up quotes and you can analyze different parts of a quote if that's what you're asking. But I'm not sure otherwise. Like you break up a long quote into smaller parts if you still want to include a lot of that quote. Sometimes that gives you more flexibility and allows the quote to kind of more seamlessly flow into your sentence. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, or if you have an example of a broken up quote. But yeah, markers like seeing quotes that are broken up as long as it's done with intent and you're actually showing that you're able to weave them into your sentence, and even weave little quotes into your analysis, not just for the technique, but also into your analysis parts, like the blue parts I was showing earlier. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to end it there, guys. So really appreciate you making the time. Make sure you check out Jeddle.com, check out JeddAI on their website as well. But if you have any other questions, put them in the comments. Put them in the comments, and I'll try and get to them as soon as possible. And any videos that you want made on YouTube published. I'm going to do a review soon of the Section 1 paper from last year and maybe some other years. I know that was a really popular one that a lot of you guys want to see. Doing some kind of videos breaking down essay questions, craft of writing stimuli, what I would do in those situations. Super practical stuff coming out in the next few months. So stay tuned, and look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Trying to do these weekly, Tuesdays, 7:30. So I'll see you then.